it can be a great group exercise. So the Post-its have people's names on them, right? So the Post-its are people. And so this group has been thinking about, okay, who has low interest and low power? They don't really care about our work, and they're not going to, they can't stop it and they can't support it necessarily. And you really put minimum effort into that quadrant, right? So the people who fall in that quadrant might get a general update from time to time. But, they're not people you have to spend a lot of time directly managing. If they have high interest but still low power, it's worthwhile to keep them informed. And the reason for that is that they may be part of broader networks in your organization and really interested in understanding what the work is. They might be sharing that even with people with more power. So those would be people that would get regular updates on the work or the progress of your group. But you wouldn't necessarily need to take their opinions into account because they're not going to stop your work and they're not necessarily going to support your work because the power is low. The upper left quadrant is high power but low interest. And this is a group that people can sometimes miss, right? So this is a group that's not going to be actively reaching out to you, not directly managing or influencing your work. However, they could potentially provide resources or take resources away. They could support your work or they could stop your work. Remember, power comes both in the ability to support something, but also the ability to say no, right? And so these people may not be reaching out to you, but you really need to check in and make sure that they're satisfied with the work, that they understand the progress, that if they have any questions, they're questioned or answered. And then last but not least, the upper right quadrant is high power and high interest. And these would be people directly involved with your project, maybe sponsors, maybe managers, maybe higher level leaders who really care about how this project is going. And these people you have to manage closely. You have to keep them informed and keep them satisfied, right? So you're doing both things. So as you look at this, I'm wondering what thoughts you have. Does this look like the real world to you? Is this helpful? I would love to see some reflections or thoughts on this sample map in the chat. Maybe some of you have even used this kind of map before. So thinking about your work or your group's work in your names, of course, I don't want you to put this in the chat, but write down some names. Think about some names of people whose cooperation you need, who need to cooperate with you, share information, agree to changes you make, help you in your work. Whose compliance do you need? So who needs to just say yes to what you do? Whose opposition could keep you from accomplishing your work? And that might be some of the same people or might be different people. And last but not least, who needs your cooperation and compliance? Then once you've got those names, and I'd love you to have, you might have 4 or 5 names, you might have 10 names, but think about, do you have a relationship? Do you need to cultivate it, or might you improve or repair it? So I'm going to give you about 8 minutes to do this exercise. As I said, I'll send out a pulse check because we don't need to see. We have greater and greater interdependency. So we are dependent on others to get things done, and others are dependent on us. More and more, for our work to be successful, we have to work with many people in the organization who aren't necessarily all people are potential allies. And this can sometimes go against your experience. It can go against other people's experience. It can go against long-standing divides in the organizational culture, right? But it's really important if you're going to influence someone to take that first step and assume they're a potential ally. So let's look at the detail on that. I am going to refresh my browser because it is not progressing. Sorry, I just want to make sure you can hear me. Just give me a yes in the chat if you can hear me. Excellent. Okay. So we talked about the first fundamental, thank you. The fundamental piece of this is to assume everyone is a potential ally. So influencing is about trade. It's about exchanging something you have, something that the other person values in exchange for something you want, right? And you'll remember when we talked about power last Thursday, we talked about power and ethics, right? Power in and of itself isn't ethical or unethical. It's how we use power. So we as human beings need to select how we use our power in order for it to be for the good of the organization. And the same is true as for influence as a type of power, right? Influence is a type of power. You want to use your influence for the good of the organization. You want to be aligned with the organization's goals, and you want to treat people in ways that are respectful and create positive relationships over the long term. If you don't do this, for example, if you use influence solely for your own gain and not for the organizational goals or for your group, you might get away with it for a while, but eventually it's going to come back and it's going to hurt your reputation, right? So we like people who are team players. We like people who have clear agendas and make those agendas transparent to everyone around them. Okay. So the next piece of this model is about setting aside your negative assumptions, right? Setting aside your negative assumptions, clarifying your own goals and priorities, and then diagnosing the world of the other person. Let's see what that looks like. So clarifying your goals and priorities. This is really interesting because a lot of times we may have this in our head, but we don't explain it. Or we may not even have it in our head as clearly as possible, right? So once you've set aside your negative assumptions and you're treating the person you want to influence as a potential ally, the next thing you need to do is get really clear on what it is you want to ask for. What are your objectives? What do you have that you can potentially trade? And what is it that they value and how do they want to be related to? Remember the platinum rule that I talked about at the start of this class. So other questions you can ask are what pressures are they under? How are they measured? And what is their style? What is their preference in terms of style? Now, in order to get all of this information and really understand the other person's world, you're going to use what you know, what's obvious to you. You're going to look at the language. You're going to look at things that they actually say. You're going to look at tone, emotion, nonverbals. You might also ask others, what is it that this group values, or how have you worked with them before that's been successful? You might ask them directly, like the example that Julie gave in terms of feedback, and be careful not to stereotype, right? So these are some of the ways you can gather information about that other person's world. Things that are barriers that will stop you from understanding the other person's world. One is a negative attribution cycle. So this is basically looking for things that are going wrong or looking for things that didn't go well, using that to come up with general judgments and then looking for more bad things based on that information, right? So that's a negative attribution cycle. You want to break out of that. You want to, again, start with the idea that you can work with this person, that they are a potential ally. Another challenge is distancing difficult people. And this one is just like an Achilles heel for me personally. I can tell you that I like to be friendly and I like to work with other people. But if someone's really difficult, I tend to distance myself from them. And I can think of one time I did that, and that person was my boss. And that was not a very effective strategy, right? So even if someone's really difficult, if you don't like them, if they're hard to work with, you've got to take that professional attitude, go into it positively. And, they're not going to be your best friend. You're not going to be your favorite person to work with, but you need to work with them enough so that you can be effective in your role. And last but not least, another barrier to acting on knowledge is assuming motives and intentions. If you think you know someone's motives and intentions, you've got to test that with them. You've got to ask them. You've got to check that out with others, right? If you just make an assumption and then act based on that assumption, you may be right, but you may be wrong, and that may keep you from being able to really influence that person. Okay, so we're assuming that all are potential allies. We've clarified our goals and priorities. We've spent some time diagnosing the world of the other person. So we're trying to understand what it is that they value, how do they like to be interacted with. And next, and this is where the model gets much more specific, you identify relevant currencies, things that they have and currencies that you have. And this is what is going to be at the heart of the trade. So let's look at what currencies are in this Bradford-Cohen model, right? So there are 5 different buckets or types of currencies that you have. And when I teach this model, what I encourage people to think about this model as a way of expanding your ideas or views around what it is you have to share and to trade with others. Because some of these are going to be obvious, and some of them you might say, I do that, but I never thought of it as a currency, right? So there are 5 general areas: inspiration-related currencies, how you provide meaning to other people's work; task-related, how you give direct assistance; position-related, how you enhance others' positions in the organization, not your own. Your own will be indirect, but how you enhance others. Relationship-related, strengthening the relationship; and personal-related, enhancing others' sense of self. Let's look in detail at what that is. So here are some examples of inspiration-related currencies. And as I'm talking these through and giving examples, I'd love for you to think about what currencies you typically use. What do you value most for others? And is there a relationship on that stakeholder map that you need to improve? Are there some currencies here that might be helpful for you, right? So let's talk about the inspiration-related first. Vision, excellence, and moral and ethical correctness. So this is really do as I do, walk the talk, and to be able to articulate and explain to people, but also show people that you are acting in accordance with the company values. So vision, being able to explain at the group level why a project is particularly important, or how a project is going to create a positive change in your organization. Excellence, really making sure that things are high quality, that things are correct, that things exceed people's expectations, and then that moral and ethical lens on what you're doing. So those are some examples of inspiration-related currencies. Task-related currencies, these are probably the ones that you're most familiar with. And a lot of people who are working on influence stay just in this bucket, right? So, giving someone more resources. But some of them are maybe less obvious. So challenge, learning, that's a currency. Let me put you on this project. And I think it's a great opportunity for you to learn this new tool so that you can become the expert in our group on this new tool. I use 2 currencies there. I use task-related currency, challenge learning, and a position-related currency, recognition and visibility. So I used 2 when I made that. Assistance, we often think of this. Organizational support, similar to assistance. How can I help you? How can I make sure the organization is supporting your work? Rapid response. A lot of people use this, and this was an example of one. When I first heard this list, I was like, oh, that's a currency. These are people who turn things around quickly. If you can turn someone's request around quickly, that's a type of currency. And simply sharing information is a currency. So taking that extra time to really explain something or to share the context or information, those are all currencies you can share. Once you've shared those, people are more likely to reciprocate and share with you. Let's look at position-related currencies. So I mentioned recognition. We all like recognition. Be sure to recognize others. Visibility, that's really highlighting the importance of an individual's work or contribution and highlighting it within a group or beyond a group or with leadership. Reputation, so being one of those people who's consistent or always delivers high quality or has that rapid response, those are types of currencies you can build. Insiderness and importance. Well, a lot of people use this one as well. Let me tell you about how key what it is we're doing is. And then contacts, your network. That's a position-related currency. I can put you in touch with Sandra over in HR, and she can solve that problem for you. Personal related currencies, these are currencies that you want to use on a very regular basis, expressing gratitude to people, taking ownership and being involved. That's a personal related currency. That's something that people value from you. Self-concept, how you feel about yourself, bringing in a positive self-concept into the work, and creating a sense of comfort in a group can be a type of personal currency. And that might be letting people fail from time to time or telling people you have their back. Those are examples of personal related currencies. And last but not least, we've got relationship related, which is providing understanding. So letting people know you understand their situation, accepting and including people and providing personal support. Okay, so I asked you to think about currencies you typically use and currencies you value from others. And I would love for you to put into the chat now some currencies that you use and some currencies that you value from others. So just put use or value, and what are some of the currencies on this list? So currencies that you use and currencies that you value from others. I'll wait till we get some chat on this.